Welcome. In this video I'm going to go over the process of setting up on a Raspberry Pi computer using a headless setup with the ability to remotely view the desktop using VNC. So I did a previous video where I did a headless setup, and I'll put a link in the description of my Raspberry Pi playlist where you can find that and other videos that I've done on the Raspberry Pi. Also put a link in the description to the hardware I'm using on Amazon, and if you use that link it helps me out a little bit and doesn't cost you anything extra. So I'm doing this on a Mac, but this should work on a PC or Linux computer. I need a couple pieces of software. The first is the Raspberry Pi OS Imager. So you want to download and install that, and then you also want the VNC viewer. And I'll put a link in the description to these websites where you can download these. And you can download this for many different systems. I have macOS selected. So I've downloaded and installed both of these. One thing on the Raspberry Pi OS Imager is make sure you have the latest version. I'm using version 1.6.1. If you have an older version, it may not work the same. So I'll close out of here. I'll go into Raspberry Pi Imager. I'll click on Choose OS. So you can go here to Raspberry Pi OS, click on it, and it will install the OS. But I like to download the ISO from the website and then go to Use Custom, and then I choose that ISO. So I have a ton of ISOs here. So if you look here, there's three versions. There's light, full, and regular. So regular is the regular desktop. The light version doesn't have a desktop interface, so you don't want that version. And full has the desktop interface with lots of other software installed. So I'll do the regular one. I'll hit open. I'll insert my SD card. So I'll click on storage. I'll choose my SD card reader. So before I hit write, I want to hit Control-Shift-X, and that will bring up some advanced options. So I want to disable overscan. You typically want that if you're using a regular computer monitor. We can set the host name. So I'll change this to Pi VNC. I'll select Enable SSH, I'll set a password, I'll scroll down. So you can set your Wi-Fi, scroll past that section. If you need to set up Wi-Fi, you can do it there. I'm using Ethernet. I'll check Set Locale Settings. It has my time zone correct, so I won't change that. And the keyboard layout is US, that looks good, and I'll skip the first run wizard. And then we have these other settings, I'll leave those as is. I'll hit Save, then I'll hit Write, I'll hit Yes. It'll ask me for my password, so I'll enter that in. I'll hit OK. And now it will write and verify the SD card. Okay, that's finished. I'll hit continue. I'll quit out of Raspberry Pi Imager. I'll remove the microsd card. So now I'm going to insert it to the Raspberry Pi, which is powered down right now, and I'll turn it on. So mine is connected to the network. If you didn't have it connected to the network, you would need to have configured the Wi-Fi. And I also don't have a monitor plugged into this. So I inserted the card into the Raspberry Pi and I've turned it on. So now I'm going to open up my terminal on my computer. So on a Mac, I'll hit Command Space and I'll just type in terminal and hit enter, and that will open the terminal. If you're on Windows, you can open up the search and search for CMD and open that up. So this is using ZeroComp. You would need that installed on Windows. You can Google how to install that, and that will allow you to access the Raspberry Pi by a host name as opposed to the IP address. So I'll try pinging it. I'll type ping space pivnc.local. Okay, there we go. So it can take a little while to boot the first time because it has to resize the partition on that microSD card. So I'll clear the screen here. So I want to connect up to the Raspberry Pi, and since we enabled SSH, I can just type SSH space pi at pivnc.local, and you'd want to use whatever hostname you set there. I'll hit enter. It wants me to confirm that I want to continue to connect, so I'll hit yes here. Now I'll type in my password, and I'm connected into the Raspberry Pi. Clear my screen here. So now I want to turn on VNC. In order to do that, you want to type sudo space raspi-config. I'll hit enter. I'll move down to interface options. I'll hit enter. I'll go down to VNC. It says, would you like VNC server to be enabled? I'll hit yes. So that will turn on VNC server. I'll hit OK. I'll go to finish. So now I will go to the VNC viewer. So I already have that open. I'll go to file and new connection. Under VNC viewer, I'll type in pivnc.local. For name, I'll just call it Pi VNC. Let's go to options here. Everything looks good. Expert, that looks good. So I record these at 720p, so you can't see the OK at the bottom of the screen, so I'll just hit enter, and that should do it. So if I go to window here, I can choose VNC viewer, and that will bring this up. And I can click on Pi VNC. I'll double click on that. This will connect to the Raspberry Pi. It says VNC server is not recognized. Do you want to continue? I'll say continue. It's asking me for my username and password, so I'll type that in. And you can have it remember your password, so I'll hit OK. It says VNC Viewer requires access to the local computer's accessibility features to send media keys such as play and volume up to the remote computer. So I'll say give access. I'll have to go through my system preferences. I'll authenticate here, I'll enter my password. I'll go to VNC Viewer, I'll hit check mark there, and I'll close this. So if you're on Windows, you may have some other security features. Okay, so it says cannot currently show the desktop. So I need to go back into my terminal, and I'll go back into Raspberry Pi config. We'll go to display options. I'll choose resolution. I'll scroll down to 1920 by 1080. And actually I record this at 720p, so I'll just do 720p. So it's DMT mode 85, but you could choose whatever resolution you want. I'll hit OK. I'll hit OK. I'll go to finish. It asks if I want to reboot, so I'll say yes. Okay, so now it's pinging. And VNC already automatically loaded. So if I didn't have this up, I could go back into VNC and double click on it and log back in. And there we have the Raspberry Pi desktop. So I can do this full screen. Here we go. So I'm on my Mac here and it looks like I'm on my Raspberry Pi computer. I can do something like open up a web browser. So a little tip if you want to speed up the performance is to use a low resolution like I'm using. So I'm using 720p. Another thing you can do is get rid of this backdrop image. So I can go to desktop preferences. Where it says layout, fill screen with image, I can just say no image. Because it has to send that over across the network, it's a lot easier to send just a blank screen. So you're not going to have extremely high performance on here. Like if I play this video, I don't know how well it's going to look. Let's scroll here. So I mean, it's not too bad. So if you want to get out of here, just put your mouse towards the top of the screen and you can hit the full screen button there. Now, if you have something like a 1080p display and your Raspberry Pi is set to 720p, you can have it in a nice window at native resolution. That's really nice. Or you could do 1080p and have it full screen. There's lots of different options there. So that's how you can set up VNC headless on a Raspberry Pi and view the desktop using VNC. That's all I'm going to cover in this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. If you like this video, please click like. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I'd appreciate it if you could do that. And thanks for watching. Until next time, goodbye.